Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Manchester City humbled in the Arctic. A huge win for Bodo Glimt, perhaps the biggest in their history. 2 games in a row now where City should have lost by more. Quite the effort from Pep to get City above Spurs in the running order. We sacked Thomas Frank on Monday. Reverse voice note psychology. He's still here. Was that a job-saving win against Dortmund? Spurs were good. They got the luck. Frank might argue he hasn't had much of that. Arsenal win again at Inter. Jesus and Gyökeres scoring. Another good day for them. All that plus a big win for Real Madrid and a late one for Sporting over PSG. We'll appreciate that Brighton overhead kick on Monday and discuss the Dutch petition to boycott the World Cup. Answer your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Archie, Rhind-Tutt, welcome.
Hey, Max.
Hello, Nicky Bandini.
Morning.
And bonjour, ça va, mon petit cochon, Philippe Auclair.
Mais ça va, mon petit cochon, Max.
Yes, absolutely. Let's start in Norway, if that's okay. Bodo Glimt 3, Manchester City 1. Incredible result for them. We think the biggest in their history. Their first season in the Champions League, their first win in this stage of the competition, first ever against an English side. And Philippe, with that moment when Jens Petter Hauge sticks it in the top corner to make it 3-0 is just unbelievable, isn't it?
It was ridiculous. It's one of these moments where there is a feeling of joy, aesthetic pleasure, and disbelief, really. Because it's not just the shot; it's also the drop of the shoulder, I think, which gives it everything. You know, it's it's the painter with a swirl of the brush before applying the absolutely perfect color at the perfect place. No, it was absolutely glorious. And it was a perfect illustration as well of what's been so impressive about them. But I think they'd already shown that the competition this year is that not only are they playing like men possessed rather than have possession, if you see what I mean, but they also play a kind of football which is utterly joyful and actually utterly beautiful, both in some of the combination play that they have, particularly counter-attacks, but also they have some very skillful players. And it makes you wonder, where do they come from? Because I was told that I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I do apologize to our Danish
I loved the
listeners.
noise you just made, Philippe, whether you were right or wrong.
Is it like this, Archie? Who? He went to the Norwegian league because basically he couldn't get a game, or he just couldn't cut it in the Danish second division. And the whole of their squad, and I think we've said that every time they've played, we've talked about them and they played in Europe, is actually 15 million euros less than what Antoine Semenyo cost Manchester City, 57.5 million euros, against a team that is 1.3 billion euros worth. I mean, that's absolutely magnificent. And I have to ask myself as well, why? I mean, I can understand that Kjetil Knudsen, their manager, is very happy where he is because his team is winning titles at home, is, I think, just making people fall for them everywhere in Europe. But it's been that job since 2018 and he's done some remarkable work. And you're wondering, so many crap managers getting work everywhere. He's obviously very, very good. And why has nobody been interested in him before? And I hope it stays the same because they are the proverbial fresh of, it's not fresh, it's Arctic fresh air. So long live Bodo Glimt. I think we all had a great time last night, except obviously the fans of Manchester City, for which we feel so sorry not.
It feels like this story that's been building and building, doesn't it? Because I remember watching them beat Jose Mourinho's Roma, and that felt like a coup and a big story at the time. And then they went and beat Porto, and I remember Lars Sivertsen at the time saying, this is even bigger, right? This is an even bigger achievement. That Roma team was at least a rotated team. It's a team that's been European Cup winners. It's more used to being in the Champions League. At the time was in the Europa League and was fielding its strongest 11. And I it's out of date, but I'm stealing it nevertheless from Lars because it's a great start. In 2024, he was tweeting that their entire wage bill was less than it cost Man United just to fire Erik ten Hag. So, I think that's a really great stat for putting into context what we're talking about here. Maybe that wage bill's gone up since then. Obviously, they're playing in the Champions League, but this is as big as certain FA Cup third round upsets we've been talking about in the last few days. This is an outrageous result when you talk about the finances of football and the disparity between teams. And it was not stolen. They didn't have the ball for a lot of the game, but they were by far the more dangerous looking team for a lot of the game. So I think it was an absolutely earned and deserved win.
So just following up on the pronunciation of Kasper Høe, my Danish friend, when he said it to me, the way I thought it sounded was, it sounds like one of the Høes in Edwin Starr's War, What Is It Good For? But I can't work out which one it is. So we'll get there, hopefully. The funny thing, I think, as well, is that he, yesterday afternoon, was linked with a £7 million move to Norwich. And Norwich went and scored 5 last night away at West Brom. So maybe he's not needed there. And the only thing I'd say on Kjetil Knutsen, the danger, I think, of taking a manager who has done this well at Bodø Glimt, and it kind of reminds me of the Thomas Frank conundrum at Spurs, in that I wonder, have they dealt with enough problems in a club which works as well as Bodø Glimt, in the same way that Thomas Frank, I don't think, really had to deal with any conflict because everything worked so well at Brentford. And when you look at how they managed to revive the career of someone like Jens Petter Hauge, hopefully Lars told, in fact, I've got a voice note from Lars telling me how to pronounce it.
Jens Petter Hauge.
There you go. Which
such a great. That is an app I want. It's just Lars pronouncing Scandinavian.
Right.
But anyway, carry on. He's on tomorrow to confirm everything.
Seriously, but it also kind of. I just kind of want like next time he scores in the stadium, number 10, yeah, and then it's just cues to Lars. Anyway, the way that he's found his form, having really struggled outside Norway. With 4 Champions League goals, the fact that Bodø had been 2-0 up against Spurs earlier this season, before then Spursing it up, that they are able to hold their nerve against a City side like they were. And the fact is, it could have been so much more.
Sure.
5 or 6 wouldn't have flattered them. And they'd not played since December the 10th. And of course, well, they are fresher than that, but there's being fresh and there's being game ready. And yeah, for the way that they were so organised, they transitioned and countered in such a sharp fashion. And to come back to Kasper Høe, the way that he took that second goal in particular, in fact, both goals, he had so much time to think about each finish. And you can imagine the amount of strikers who wouldn't have been as cool in front of goal as he was. So impressive all round. And yeah, the atmosphere there looked electric as well.
Yeah. And Philippe, please don't shatter this. This is 100% good news story. As far as everything I've heard from Lars, there isn't an evil arms dealer, in a fjord somewhere funding this,
as opposed to the good arms dealers, Max. Yeah, sure.
Of course. Yeah.
No,
yeah,
it's absolutely
this is
fine.
good, isn't it, Philippe?
It's absolutely fine. It's a proper good story. The bad team in Norway is Molde. I say that. I'm probably going to get lots of criticism, but they are the people with the evil financiers behind them. But Bodo Glimt is not that kind of team at all. Anyway, I think they play like a good team in a morally good sense, Max.
Well, you would be the arbiter of that, Philippe, of course. Yeah, I do. The thing is, Nicky, like they outplayed City. And so we didn't really talk about City a lot on Monday when Man United outplayed them. And obviously it's different being outplayed by Man United and Bodo Glimt. But they're 2 significant results. And of course, Max Alleyne had a bad night and he's a very young defender. And they do have an inexperienced defence. But I just wonder on what level... You are the rational voice of the pod. Where's the crisisometer for you on Man City?
It does feel a little bit. I mean, crisis is one of those words, isn't it, that we love in the media. But I mean, it does feel a little bit wheels coming off, doesn't it, with the recent results? And I think the Elena situation is obviously like a fascinating one. Talking about a young player gets pulled off at the weekend, and then you throw him back in, and you almost wonder if there was a feeling and maybe an arrogance there of, well, this is a slightly easier game, right? It's not a Premier League level of opposition, and maybe this will help him get some confidence back, which of course backfired horrendously. But it's not just him, is it? I mean, Rodri has come back, and everyone's expecting him to be Ballon d'Or Rodri, who is incapable of losing a game for Man City, and he's been anything but. He's looked like a player who's well short of match fitness, well short of confidence, and obviously, you know, even gets himself sent off in this game. And I think the whole team feels like it's a little bit rudderless at the moment. I think you saw Haaland visibly frustrated that he wasn't getting the ball, and not getting touched at all, but certainly not getting it in the space he wanted it. All of it just feels a little bit out of control. And I do think you're right, Max. You were polite about it. I think I'm the fence sitter in chief, and I tend to think, well, you know, our sense of crisis in modern football is so out of whack, and things happen so quickly that it is a relentless schedule this time of year. You are playing every 3 days, and that does give you no time to get everything together. But it didn't feel like the sort of response you want to that game at the weekend at all. And it didn't feel like Pep Guardiola in his post-game press conference filled you with confidence either. He felt a little bit, I don't know, but again, rudderless is the word that came to mind.
Sure. I mean, Archie, you get the impression that, because there's obviously talk about what happens to City when Pep goes, but you don't get the sense with the signings they're making and his sort of iron will that I thought maybe this time last season he'd go. You know, he'd have gone or he'd go soon, but I'm not so sure.
As one City fan friend put it to me, he's such a natural contrarian that I think everyone needs to tell him that he's going to stay for him to go.
Right.
This is kind of where Pep comes from. And I think the player that I really think they miss is Kevin De Bruyne in his peak and prime, as every team would do. And no matter how much they spend, they can't find a player of his quality. And they seem to get they get players like Rhind-Tutt, who I know was not seen as the Kevin De Bruyne replacement, or Omar Marmoush, who were in great form at their other clubs. Jack Grealish to go back a few years, Calvin Phillips even at Leeds. And I think of how they take them out of their environment and they're asked to adapt to Pep's way of playing, and it takes away all the things that made them good at their previous club. And I think there is a problem in terms of finding the right players to suit his system right now. So that, but also, if you're Pep, you can't account for the kind of head loss from someone like Rodri last night. There's
Sure,
playing
madness,
badly,
yeah.
But then there's doing that, which I also have to, like, we're not going to talk about things from a Bodo Glimt perspective probably again from a very long time. So I have to say, from the point of view of the underdog, if you're looking for anything to superpower the feeling of your victory, seeing one of the most famous players on the opposition get sent off and being able to wave them down the tunnel, just from, if I'm going from Fulham fan experiences, being able to do that to Paul Scholes, Wayne Rooney, and most recently Marc Cucurella, let me tell you, like, those are as good as goals. So from a Bodo point of view, the night could not have been any better. From a City point of view, you're left wondering. In fact, I should be careful saying this to Arsenal fans of a nervous disposition, but watching that City performance last night and watching them recently, and having seen Arsenal quite a bit recently as well, I cannot see 7 points being made up and indeed overtaken, such as the way that Arsenal are playing right now.
I just wanted to add one thing on that, because you're right. I mean, that the head loss from Rodri was kind of astonishing. But I also think when I talk about being rudderless, I mean, yeah, you are playing games every 3 days. You aren't in a good run of form. You made one substitution last night, Guardiola. You were losing 2-0 at halftime. Didn't change anything. Like, where is all this money that has built a squad that's supposed to be one of the best in the world? Where is it? I mean, that's the thing which we're going to talk about, I'm certain, with Arsenal, is that the depth of the squad, the fact they change players out, can still look like that in Milan, and it just felt like, to me, it felt like, yes, there was an absence of control on the pitch, but to me, it felt like that starts with an absence of control off the pitch.
One thing as well, I'm bouncing on Archie's use of the word contrarian. When you are playing with a defense that is missing Gvardiol, Diaz, and Stones, with a 20-year-old central defender, leaving Ake on the bench, and you play with such a high line, you're mad. I mean, I'm sorry, that's mad. It's as if I want to show I can play this system with a group of players who've basically barely ever played together, when synchronizing movements for a back four is one of the hardest things to do. Well, it's simple in a way, but it requires a lot of work. And here you had them when Bodo Glimt were in possession of the ball, who were basically almost up to the halfway line, which means that Bodo was saying, thank you very much. Here's a long ball over you. Now try and deal with it. And they couldn't deal with it. And that is bizarre, but that's also very Pep-ish.
To the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium then. Tottenham 2, Dortmund 0. Simon says, as a Spurs fan, I'm starting to think the Super League was a great idea. And Simon says, would it be the first time a team has finished 17th in the Premier League 2 consecutive seasons and won the Europa and the Champions League? Just, Archie, an absolutely huge win for Thomas Frank. I mean, you can't really understate how important this victory is for him.
I know that Thomas Frank is a big gum chewer on the touchline, but I swear that his jaw was doing some extra yards last night. Just seeing how nervous he was. And the truth is that it felt, for Spurs' Champions League home form, a routine win. Dortmund didn't lay a glove on them. Even up until the red card at 1-0, it wasn't like Dortmund were able to impose themselves on the game at all. I think Spurs benefited from the switch to a back three, as we've seen in other big games this season. I think most memorably, albeit I don't think you can call a game memorable if you don't win it ultimately, but the Super Cup against PSG.
Yeah. It was real positivity there, wasn't there? Yeah.
Well, sorry, I laugh because there was just a look in your eyes there of being like, I remember positivity.
Yeah, I do.
But they were pretty dominant, and Dortmund really couldn't get into the game. And sure, the red card, you can argue about it, but even then, that there was a part of me thinking, well, will this actually put a bit more pressure on Spurs now? Are they going to manage to overthink the situation? But the truth is that having Dominic Solanke there, having somebody who, let's also remember, had been swapped in for Matthijs Tel by Thomas Frank, which, given the way that Thomas Frank's luck's been going both on and off the pitch with plastic cups and whatnot, you wouldn't have been surprised if that had gone wrong as well. But everything seemed to click last night. And okay, Dominic Solanke's finish is fortunate, but if you put yourself in the right position and you move your legs in the right direction, then you've got a chance of things happening for you. So yeah, it was so straightforward, and I think this kind of result, I think, probably plays into the frustrations of Spurs fans more, because they see the quality that is there in this team, despite the injuries that there are to players like Kulusevski and Maddison. And they see that they can overcome, as someone who watches a lot of Borussia Dortmund, I struggle to say top opposition, even if they are second in the Bundesliga. That's a complete another discussion. But I think it only adds to it. It's like, but how can we be this bad then in the Premier League? So the fact that it's Burnley up next as well, I think is pretty unhelpful, because it's like, well, you have to follow this up now. And yet, knowing the ways of Dr. Tottenham, how can you be sure?
13 without a win for Burnley. I think the key, as Archie mentioned, Nicky, is from a Tottenham point of view, is before the red card, for that first 20 minutes, it was not like Tottenham have been playing under Frank. It was front foot, it was positive, it was direct, it was actually like passing to each other, things like that, passing the ball forwards. It was these things that Tottenham fans haven't seen for months.
Yeah, I wonder if this is not to drag the conversation backwards, but this is almost the additional point on the City game, is that to a great extent these Champions League games, even though they are crammed into the schedule, coming after a round when you had a midweek round already with the cup games and everything's feeling squeezed up. I do wonder if for a lot of Premier League teams, the reality is, boring as it is, the financial reality is that Premier League teams should be winning in Europe more often than not. And so these games are sometimes less of a strain than the ones you're playing domestically. And when you get to play it against 10 men for 70 minutes, that certainly helps. I obviously didn't see the full 90 minutes of this game because it was happening concurrently with the Inter game and also a Napoli game that I was trying to keep an eye on. It certainly seems like Tottenham played this one with a very different mindset. And I think that as well as the financial side of it, which I know is boring to say, but I do think is important, I do think there's probably a mental aspect of that as well, which is that players don't feel... I think players feel very differently about the Champions League to how they do about the league. So the league has become this onerous thing for Tottenham where everything's going wrong and it's all falling away. This almost feels like the holiday. This almost feels like we're not expected to win this whole competition, but we're getting to go and play these glamorous games against opponents who are big names in Europe and who play differently. And I think when handled correctly, and there is, again, the great contrast here between this and the City game, but when handled correctly can be almost a mental refresher for players if they're feeling ground down by the grind of domestic football.
Yeah, although I would say Dortmund have got to be better than West Ham, haven't they? Like the difference in performance it was sort of astonishing. And on Solanke, Philippe, actually, it was just, it's not necessarily the goal, which obviously matters. There was a moment in the game where the ball went up to him and he held it up and he outmuscled the defender. He passed it to an on-running player, I think it might be Porro, who ran onto the ball, and it was like they haven't had a centre forward do that since he's been away, right? Because Richarlison is so random. Kolo Muani is, they're all odd footballers who just can't hold the damn thing.
Absolutely, no, I entirely agree with you, because you could argue that it's been their problem as much as the lack of a proper attacking midfielder, somebody who brings creativity to midfield. And he does have creativity. He's a very complete centre forward. He's a finisher. He can score some pretty spectacular goals. He can score some goals like the one we saw yesterday, which I have to say is the funniest goal scored in the Champions League. How many times does he hit it? Actually, is it 3? I'm not too sure.
I think it's 3. He said he could watch it in slow motion. He enjoyed it because he could watch it in slow motion go in, which is a great moment for centre forward.
It just rolls. It's wonderful. And the way it goes, boop, against the post and goes in. No, but you're absolutely right. He brings something very different, and he's been very, very much missed, actually, Dominic Solanke. Another one, perhaps, for the plane. If there is a plane,
well, maybe
taking off to America,
possibly. If there is, right? Yeah. If the World Cup even happens, so we'll get to that. The final question on Spurs, Archie, I think is okay. They go to Burnley. How many games in a row does Thomas Frank have to win before it's not the next game he has to win or he's gone? We all think about Burnley, right? If he doesn't get a win there, you think, okay, that's probably it. Then it's Frankfurt away. If he wins that, they're in the top 8 of the Champions League. Then Man City, Man United, Newcastle, Arsenal. Not nice if you have to go into those games and win them all.
He's got to bag Burnley. And the thing is that no club in the Premier League has won both of their last 2 Premier League games right now.
Wow.
Which I think is kind of amazing and tells you how close the league feels right now. And I went through it last night, and I think only 9 of the 20 have won 3 or more games in a row this season, which I guess if you spread it out makes sense. And yet, just looking at the league right now, it feels very clustered. I think as much as anything, and you saw it last night, results can happen, but it's about the feeling that he gives Spurs fans. And Spurs fans really need to have their feelings nurtured after everything that they've gone through.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, even because the second half was a bit stodgy, you saw people going, "Oh, well, the first half was half an hour ago, so this isn't."
You
this
saw
isn't
it.
Quite, yeah,
You saw it when
so good.
Vicario miscontrolled the ball, and suddenly all the rage of, if this was a relationship, the towel being left on the floor, suddenly the explosion of energy.
Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So at San Siro, Inter 1, Arsenal 3. This, Nicky, and I suppose it goes back to what you were saying about, Spurs having a bit of a holiday and it being easier. Like, Arsenal are making this look so easy, and as I can't remember the number of times you said Inter are good against everyone else going, wow, they're not that good.
Inter are less good than they were last season, in my opinion, which is, ironically, they might win a trophy this season, which they didn't do last season, because they should really win Serie A, but they should have won a trophy last season. They went for everything and won nothing, but this season I think they probably won't go as far in the Champions League, but they should win domestically. They're an odd team at the moment, Inter. There was this expectation that they were at the end of a cycle after getting crushed by Paris Saint-Germain. And then you look at players like Lautaro Martinez and Marcus Thuram and go, well, they're not old, so that's not the end of a cycle. And you've got Pio Esposito coming through, who I know Philippe enjoyed last night in his little cameo, and I think is a really talented player. And then you saw Petar Sucic, who scored a great goal last night, who actually has been very hot and cold since he signed in the summer. So I think he's still emerging, but he's 22 years old. So I don't know if the end of the cycle was ever correct. But obviously Inzaghi's gone. They have moved to a different style of football. They're more direct. And one thing that was consistent to the end of Inzaghi's tenure and is still true now is they lose all the big games domestically, or at least they don't win them. They can't beat Juventus. They can't beat Milan. They can't beat Napoli ever. Like it's the sequence is really long now. It's like back to 2024. And that's in all competitions, double figures of games. And so you see them come up against a big team like Arsenal, and even though they did go to the final of the Champions League last season, beating some big teams, I almost expect them not to show their best, because what they've been good at is
they're flat track bullies.
A little bit recently, yeah, a little bit. And so in some ways, I thought this was actually, from Inter's point of view, despite in the end losing by 2 goals, a performance not without some merits. You saw that even against a team like Arsenal, Arsenal are a juggernaut right now. Look, I'm a fan. I'm always reluctant to big them up too much, but they are structured to be one of the best teams in Europe. They've spent the money to be one of the big teams in Europe. They should be at least in the top 4 teams in Europe, I think, at this point. Probably that might be too low of an aim, given the spend. So Inter, I thought, were able to scare them at times, and it showed that their directness under Kiva, which is the new wrinkle, could be very effective. I also thought they stole the ball off Arsenal. They had a really bad start. Obviously, they went goal down. They looked on the ropes. But in the rest of that first half, they were turning Arsenal over and doing things with it. So I don't think there was nothing positive here for Inter. But I do think Arsenal were a cut above, despite not having Declan Rice in the starting 11. And I think that speaks to the outrageousness of their depth, frankly. That speaks to the outrageousness of this squad that has been built by, I was going to say by Arteta, but by the whole club. And I think that there's lots of interesting things to pull out of that, including Gabriel Jesus. I'm sure is going to be one of the first ones you want to talk about, and whether or not he should be starting up front at the weekend.
Oh, my goodness. I'm not going to try and second guess Mikel Arteta about this one. Because I have to say that the way that Victor Gyökeres reacted to the fact that Gabriel Jesus scored 2 goals was pretty exceptional. Because his own goal is really something else. And only he at Arsenal could score that kind of goals, because you need to be extremely strong, physical, being able to actually work with your teammate and also finish. And he did all 3. Can I just say one thing before going back to the game?
I'm not trying to cover your point,
Sorry?
but isn't it true that the Jesus goals were also goals you felt like maybe only Jesus could score at Arsenal?
Absolutely, and I'm sure
So
we could
kind
say
of
there are
both of them,
goals
right?
that Kai Havertz can score, and neither of the other 2 is a much better head of the ball, for example, than either. I think that Gyökeres is certainly than Jesus. Just one thing I want to add before we go into the detail: isn't it beautiful to see 2 teams from great historic clubs play in their normal colours? both of them for once.
Yeah.
Oh
Always.
my God. Oh, that was such a beautiful thing to see those two great shirts. My gosh. Anyway, but yeah, I really don't know. I mean, you would think that against a central pairing of Maguire and Martinez, right? You would go for a more mobile centre forward, I would think, because I do think, which means Gabriel Jesus. That's what I would do, but I am not Mikel Arteta. And it might be that he thinks, well, Gyökeres had his favor for quite a few games, starting every game, Jesus coming on. This time it was the other way around, which might indicate that he wanted to rest him, perhaps, for the game. I don't know. I really don't know. If we had a straw poll, who would you put? I mean, both options are possible. I would go for Jesus on the strength of what he showed, not just in the goals he scored. Second one was a little bit funny as well. Not quite a Solanke funny, but quite funny. But also what he contributed to the team as a whole. He looked so sharp, back to Jesus at his best that we saw both with Manchester City at Arsenal at the start. So who would you go for?
Well, that was
Nicky.
when we asked. You can't just answer. You can't just answer.
I'm answering
you can't
the
say,
question.
You can't in a long way say who would you go
I
for and just
said
go who would you go
Jesus.
for.
I said Jesus myself, but there you go.
I mean, I'm indifferent, I will say. Archie.
I think that I would go with Gyökeres, because also I think last night was such a big moment for him. If you look at the kinds of goals that he's scored for Arsenal so far, I think you have to go back to August against Leeds when he truly scored one which is on his own terms. And you've seen it with how sheepish he's been after he scores goals, where he kind of feels like, well, I mean, does that really count if I'm 2 yards from goal? And the fact that it comes from his own brilliance, you can kind of see that after he scores in the celebration, there's almost a kind of a shock of being like, oh, wait, I'm back. This is the guy who was at Sporting. I've rediscovered myself. And I think it's also natural, by the way, that it's taken him this long to adapt, because at Arsenal, he's getting half the chances that he was getting at Sporting. I think of the game against Brighton the other week in December, where he gets a chance after about 90 seconds, and that's his lot for the game. And that's not what he's used to for the past few seasons. And this thing of Arsenal's depth, by the way, it kind of reminds me of how Sir Alex Ferguson and United would build squads when they had Cole, York, Sheringham, Solskjaer. Not to have enough, but to blow other teams out the water. And this is what Arsenal have this feel about them with right now, where it's not to, we just need to make sure we've got cover. It's how can we be stronger than every other team around? And I think that is also why, I'm going to say it again, that's why I think they are going to end up with silverware that they really, really want this season, is because of that mentality. And I had the pleasure of seeing them live away at Portsmouth the other week, and seeing how older members of the squads are looking after younger members of the squad at times when you'd think they'll be concentrating on other things. Seeing the way that it was Gabriel going over to Lewis Skelly when Noni Madueke had a penalty, just making sure that his role was all okay. And Fratton Park is a place where you can lose your head in the rain and the thunder of the challenges going in. And just how cool they all looked, and no one seemed to bat an eyelid. There is such an unbelievable focus to this Arsenal team right now that is just really quite something to behold.
We shouldn't forget we're also talking about an Arsenal team which has not necessarily been firing on all cylinders recently. So let's not be carried away by a superb performance against Inter. And the one thing which was so noticeable is with Arsenal, it's almost every game you can tell what it's going to be like in the first 30 seconds. This time you knew it was going to be all right because of the energy with which they pressed Inter, which is sometimes not present. Also with the weight of the passes, they were fizzing a bit more quickly than usual. And there was also another reason for that, is that before kick-off, they already knew they were through, that whatever happened, they would be there. They wouldn't have to go through those ridiculous playoffs and so forth. That's it. They were in through the second phase of the Champions League. And intensity goes with relaxation. And Arteta looked phenomenally relaxed. He was smiling on the pitch. He never smiles. Or as we say in French, he smiles when he burns himself. And this relaxed attitude is, if he can take this one, bottle it up, and pass it on to the team every time it's about to go into the pitch, they'll go far. But that, for me, is going to be the main problem. Yesterday night, they were in the perfect mood, which explains why they were able to express themselves so fully. All the other reasons, by the way, what Archie and Nicky talked about, are absolutely true. But there was something else about it, which is this relaxation, which they don't always show in other games.
I totally agree with that. I do think it's worth saying Inter went for Arsenal in the way that a lot of teams won't. They didn't sit deep, and that makes a big difference as well. They gave them chances because they came at them, and that's something that's part of it. I also this is completely childish, but I really enjoyed Gabriel Jesus giving his interview at the end of the game, talking about it's all thanks to Jesus. I'm sorry, his name is Jesus, and when he says it's all thanks to Jesus, it makes me laugh. I'm a child.
Yes.
I'm sorry if that upsets
No,
me.
fair enough. When he has the t-shirt, rather, but it's so good, isn't it? Not that, it needs a real caveat. Not that one. That's me. I understand there is a difference. Anyway, let's rattle through the other games. Real Madrid 6, Monaco 1. All the Galacticos having a nice time. Mbappe got 2. Vinicius walloped 1 into the top corner. Bellingham scored late on. Maybe Arbeloa is the vibes man.
There was something. I mean, first of all, Monaco are crap. Let's be absolutely clear about that.
Okay, good.
It's normal they should beat them.
Okay.
But the one thing I will remember from last night is the way Mbappe celebrated his goals. It was one of the most for the cameras moments on both goals. I'll make sure I don't do my ridiculous celebration, but I go and manifest unity with my great friend Vinicius, which is the most bollocks that I've seen on the pitch for a while. It's purely for the cameras. It was as spontaneous as a whole enjoy Ramon's jeans for people who would have references of a certain time. But they were quite impressive, I have to say. They were quite impressive, but that's all I had to say, that the show of unity between Vinicius and Mbappe was actually hilarious, I think, in some ways.
I know that when you say the phrase protests in Monaco, it throws up quite an interesting image kind of mentally in terms of how that would manifest itself. But there have been, haven't there? Like what are the locals upset about exactly?
Fact that their team is crap. I mean, apart from that, what do you think? Which is not a talentless team. There have been loads of talk about the manager having to be sacked and the rest of it. It's not a happy place. It's been such a weird season because if you remember, they actually started quite well if you looked at the results, but they were playing rubbish, and it's just not happening. So it was not at all a surprise when I saw, I was watching the other game and I had those goal alerts, and at 5th minute, I say, goal alert, Real Monaco. I think, I know who scored, and I know which club scored, and I probably know which player scored because, of course, it is the immutable law of the X. He had to score in Monaco. Kylian, didn't he? A double. So, but yeah, to be honest, I'm Monaco. I'm done with Monaco. They're just a joke in some ways.
Fine. If you're done, I'm done. Let's do Sporting PSG. You watched this as well, Philippe, didn't you? And Sporting winning it late
crazy. Absolutely crazy game in which PSG had left not just their shooting boots, but their crossing boots, their dribbling boots in the dressing room at the Parc des Princes, I think. They still dominated this absolutely outrageously. And on another night, they might have won by 5 or 6 goals. But it was one of those where there was always something missing at the conclusion of any action. And there were plenty. And it was not a B team, by the way. The only player who was perhaps missing, whom you would have thought would have been in the starting lineup with Kvaratskhelia, who actually came in and scored an absolute beauty of a goal to make it 1-1.
Lovely goal.
And Sporting, my goodness, they hang on. They defended resolutely, I believe is the adverb to use and profited from two moments of, just weakness in the Parisian defense. Lucas Chevalier is not exactly guilt-free on those two, and Suarez scored a double and couldn't quite believe it. Suarez, who also got, I think, when players stop other players who are countering and grab hold of their shirt. Suarez went one beyond that. The way he nearly managed to take the shirt of Kvaratskhelia at the end and got booked for it was absolutely magnificent. It took him about 15 yards to stop him as well. And the shirt was all over the place and it didn't rip. Very, very good manufacturer, obviously. But it was a strange one. It was a very strange one. And PSG on other nights should have won at a canter. And in the end, they were done by some opportunistic finishing from Suarez and some, very poor finishing on their own side. They had two goals choked off as well, which, honestly were choked off. If Wenger had his way, they would have been given, but we won't go back there.
Oh, let's not go on to daylight. Yeah, look, PSG, had they won, they'd have definitely been in the top 8, but they have to win in a couple of weeks to be certain of that. Copenhagen won, Napoli won. Yeah, Napoli had one up and Copenhagen down to 10 men. Nicky, and Antonio Conte's being hopeless in Europe continues.
I haven't bet on sports for a long time, but when they were 1-0 up and a red card up, if I'd had a betting account open somewhere, I would have been like, I am betting on them not winning this game because it is Antonio Conte in Europe. And some way, somehow, from this perfect position, they will find a way not to get that result. And lo and behold, they found a way. Heaven knows how, because they had buckets of chances. Even before the red card, they were making chances. But it's this impossibly repeating story. I mean, Scott McTominay keeps showing up. He scored, I think, 4 of their 6 goals in Europe this season. So he's apparently immune to this Conteification of their European efforts. But the rest of the team just cannot do it. And they're really, I think, well, I've been saying it for a while, so it's not news to me, but I think they're not going to make it through even to the playoff round because they're 23rd right now. That's before, obviously, all the Wednesday night games get played. And their last game is against Chelsea. And I don't see any reason other than perhaps some sort of Conte revenge arc against Chelsea to believe they're suddenly going to fix this odd European malaise where they just, even when circumstances fall their way, as they really did with that start. I mean, Delaney, it was 100% a red card, by the way. It's a reckless challenge, but to be in that position 1-0 up and playing better already than your opponents and to have him sent off and then score, I don't know how they managed, even having seen it, I don't know how they managed not to win. They certainly should have won, but it somehow felt entirely inevitable that they would fail to win.
A big win for Ajax at Villarreal. Last-minute winner means they lost their first 5, but they've won the last 2, so they could squeeze into the playoffs. Olympiacos beat Leverkusen 2-0, and Club Brugge won 4-1 at Kairat. So on Monday, Brighton and Bournemouth drew 1-1 on a kind of Monday Night Football you don't have to watch type game. But, Philippe, it is worth talking about that overhead kick from Charalampos Kostoulas in the last minute.
It was an absolutely magnificent occasion. And I have to say, not exactly the kind of goal you would have expected after watching the rest of the game, which was, hard fought enough. But when
fine.
There was,
fine.
Yeah,
it was fine.
But it was not of the highest quality, shall we say that? Considering these are two teams which actually can play very decent football usually. But this was a little bit different because I'm not absolutely sure he meant to place the ball where he did place it. And I think it has to do with the fact that he catches it slightly on the outside of his boot. But this, on the other hand,
if he meant it, it's If he meant it, it is unbelievable.
It's mental because it's like slicing through the ball when doing a bicycle kick after having chested it first, which is a little bit special. But it is very special in any case. And he didn't seem to be too phased out, but it's almost like, yeah, I do that. That's when he seems to be quite sure of himself, this young chap, isn't he? And apparently, listening to Louis Dunk at the end, he does try those quite regularly in training. So there you go. It actually worked on this occasion, but it was absolutely superb. And a goal which perhaps, yes, a little bit unlike the rest of the game, but it was worth persevering with this one just to see this wonderful moment.
Archie,
Max,
you're encroaching on your Fulham minute, but yeah, carry on.
Well, I'm going to talk about your Sunday League career. Of the goals that you scored, how many did you really mean to put exactly where they ended up?
Ah.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, some. You go, I'm trying to get this in the corner, you know. But I haven't scored many
If you're
overhead
trying
kicks.
an overhead kick, it's a shot, right? And you're hoping to put it in the direction of goal. And if it goes in, I think all bets are off. It's amazing. Well done. Doesn't matter exactly where it goes.
I'm sorry. As the custodian of the Sinclair spectrum, it's not quite correct. Because, you know, if he middles it into the top corner, that's different to sort of slicing it into the top corner. Anyway, Fulham, 1 minute. Off you go, Archie.
I had the pleasure of seeing 4 Fulham games in a row live earlier this month. And I ended what had been a 10-game, 7-year winless streak of not having seen us win. And to be honest, the moment I saw Cody Gakpo make it 2-1 for Liverpool in the 94th minute, I thought, I need to stop coming. I am the problem here because we seem to be really good when I'm not here. And then Harrison Reed restored my faith in Fulham.
And how, right?
And in football, I was like 10 rows up behind the goal. I saw the fire in Harrison Reed's eyes light up. And to see him not know how to celebrate was even better. To have that followed up by beating Chelsea and seeing Kevin rainbow flick as he tried to waste time. Kevin is a footballer that fascinates me, and in that he has such a high ceiling, it's just he doesn't know quite how to get anywhere near there because he's capable of things that no one else can do, except he just cannot choose which one to do at the right time. We are very close to Barry's prediction of us finishing 12th. It might well end up there still. But look, the ride has been fun. I still think I'm worried about Marco Silva leaving. I'm worried about Harry Wilson leaving. But Harry Wilson has also reached new heights that I didn't think he would ever reach. So yeah, Fulham are in a nice position, competing in every game. And having seen us through all of our Premier League years, that is not something that I'm still entirely used to, but it's fun.
Good. Lovely minute. Paul says, given today's Guardian article suggesting UEFA could lead a World Cup boycott, what are the chances of this actually happening? That's referring to Nick Ames' article yesterday, which said European football leaders are increasingly concerned about Donald Trump's wish to annex Greenland. They've held initial discussions about how sport could respond. The Guardian understands the implications for the World Cup this summer were among the topics raised among 20 football association heads in Budapest on Monday. Talks about the Greenland crisis were held informally on the sidelines of an event organised to celebrate the Hungarian Football Federation's 125th anniversary, in the knowledge that a unified European response may be required should Trump seek to escalate the situation. This is from T, a listener in the States, saying, please share my message on your pod. Most of us here in the US are horrified and sickened by what's happening. As a football fan, I'm equally disgusted by FIFA and Infantino. I urge World Cup fans, stay away. I understand why you would want to see your country play, but Gianni and Trump do not deserve you're coming here to the US. Make your dollars count, go elsewhere, go to Canada or Mexico and send a message to them both. And Philippe, you wanted to mention a petition to boycott the World Cup that's gained a lot of traction in the Netherlands, over 100,000 signatories.
Yeah, that's quite extraordinary. It was only 8,000 signatories on Monday, and it was started by a guy called Teun van der Keuken, who is quite famous in the Netherlands, somebody who fights for consumers' rights, so a bit of a TV personality, as well as a writer. And but he started this petition, which attracted, I said, about 8,000 signatories to start with on Monday. And then he took part in a TV program, a TV debate on Monday evening. And then the petition has took off almost immediately. And we are now, as we speak, I've just literally refreshed my screen. We are now at 110,476 signatories. And I should add that it is only in the Netherlands, because it is a petition which is sent to the KNVB, the Dutch Federation, the Minister of Sports, and the Premier and the Prime Minister, and it's actually in Dutch, but it's basically boycott het Trump World Cup. So I think you understand what it's about. But it's a lot, and you're wondering if it's not going to happen in other countries, because here what has been the driving force for the success of this petition, at least in its popularity, has been also the popularity of the person who started it. And there are probably people everywhere in Europe who feel the same way. And there have been other calls for the boycott. I mean, I was really struck by what Claude Leroy said after the African Cup of Nations. And Claude Leroy, one of the heroes of the final, because he was one of with Sadio Mane, he's the one who made sure we had a final to end up with. He said maybe it would be a good idea to boycott the US World Cup. Claude Leroy is somebody who is universally respected in Africa. He's coached so many national teams there. He's an African in so many ways. And he said, this guy has cut the aid for all our countries. Let's not give him the World Cup. And there is starting to be a movement, or rather a conviction, and I'm sure you share it, and you talked about it with your friends. I'm talking about you guys, but also who listen to the Guardian Football Weekly. We have this feeling that this World Cup, something is going to happen. Either it's not going to happen, or we're not going to go, or countries are going to boycott it. Something is wrong. And we know what is wrong. We know the reason for all that is because of that man and that country. We know that. But there is, for me, it has always been at the back of my mind. And I do believe that there is a movement which is going to start if there is not a rapid resolution of the tensions that we saw so blatantly exposed in Davos again, and which there won't be any slackening of the tension. So I'm expecting this petition to do even better. I'm expecting other petitions to carry on. And I'm also expecting and hoping that when the UEFA delegates get together in Brussels on 12 February, they won't be completely deaf to what everybody else is thinking. And to be honest, they might not have a choice, because it will be the governments who decide what happens, whatever they say about the independence of football associations. Let's not forget that Denmark is still in the race to qualify for the World Cup. Now, that would be something, wouldn't it?
We are planning to be there. Like, Football Weekly are planning to, partly because if you're not on the West Coast of the States, we want to watch every game and do a pod every day. Like, you can't, that time zone is the one you need to be in. I keep saying the Cook Islands is the same time zone, but people aren't listening to me as I sit on next to palm trees and just sit in the sea watching the games. They're worried about the Wi-Fi quality in the Cook Islands. But what are you? Do you think you'll boycott it, Philippe? What do you think you'll do, or do you not know yet?
I think that the situation will have deteriorated to such an extent in the weeks to come that a number of countries will find themselves in a position where taking part in a World Cup in the United States of America becomes an impossibility. That's what I think. And it might be under the shape of a boycott as such. I just have the feeling that things are so bad. I mean, I think, like all of you, first thing I do when I wake up is check out the news and wondering what nonsense has been coming from the other side of the Atlantic during the night. What kind of threats have been made? You heard the extraordinary speech that Mark Carney gave at Davos yesterday, when he talked about,
and they're co-hosts, right?
And yes, absolutely. And he talks about a rupture. It doesn't talk about a crisis. It talks about a rupture which has already taken place, and a new order being put in place in our relationship with the United States of America. And you look at that, I think it's going to be impossible. When you look at the public opinion actually as well, there was a call. The possibility of a boycott was also mentioned by the spokesman on foreign affairs of the CDU, that is the party of Chancellor Merz. And maybe Archie, you can tell us more about that. But there was in which he envisaged the possibility of a boycott as a weapon used by the European countries to fight against those tariffs and so forth and those threats, and of course the threat of annexation of Greenland. But there was a poll done by Bild on 15th and 16th of January, which indicated that already more people were in favor of a boycott than against it in Germany. Ordinary people.
Bild is an interesting one because they're the biggest tabloids in Germany, and yeah, the closest thing that I think we have to the Sun. And for example, like one of their headlines that I saw last night was how bad would the US taking over Greenland really be? Like, it's always super provocative in its nature. Just to add a thought really to what Philippe's saying, because I agree with it all. My only fear is that football is not really used to doing the right thing, nor indeed are the players involved in it. And I think it would be the most powerful thing would be seeing players come on board with this, and that is where I struggle to see it happening and materializing right now, because football players live in their own bubble to such an extent, the majority of them. And Philippe,
Sure.
like when it comes to it being taken out of their control by their governments, I like to see that how that happens. But right now, I think my faith in the right things happening, because of the way that we've reached this point in history, has been such a problem. I struggle to see. I struggle to find hope. That's kind of my issue.
There's always hope somewhere, somehow.